Hello, welcome to Issues and Ideas. I'm Chris DeBello. So how about that weather, huh? Well, we have about two-thirds of the country either buried in snow, sliding on ice, or frozen to the bone, which brings me to something I want to address dog owners with. Leaving your dog outside in weather like this. There are state laws against doing this, every state. Now, they'll vary from place to place, and local laws could even be more strict than state laws. But just as an example, since we're here in New Jersey, I'll use New Jersey state law as an example about prohibited, it's called tethering, meaning leashing your dog outside, prohibited tethering conditions. It is considered cruel restraint to tether a dog in these ways. Time restrictions outdoors between 11 at night and 5 in the morning for more than 30 minutes during what's termed adverse environmental conditions, temperatures below 32 degrees or above 90 degrees, or during severe weather like snow, rain, ice, or wind even. If the dog is less than 4 months old or is a nursing female, can't tether them outside at all. And for safety hazards, in a way that allows the dog to reach another dog or objects that pose a risk of entanglement, strangulations, drowning, fences, pools, trees, public roads even. It's also against New Jersey state law to tether your dog in an unoccupied building or on vacant property. Yeah, I know, that sounds more like cruelty to be sure. You wonder why there's a law like that. So it must have happened at some point, and someone caught somebody's attention. Now, to tether your dog according to the rules, you can only use properly fitted body harnesses or buckle-type collars. Use of a choke collar, prong collars, head harnesses, or weights tied to tethers, that's prohibited. Chains with metal links thicker than 1/4 of an inch, that's prohibited. And as far as access to water, there has to be continuous access to clean water, a liquid, non-frozen state. That's required if a dog is tethered for more than 30 minutes. You fail to follow those rules and those laws in New Jersey, it will be costly. First offense is a fine of $100. Second offense, a fine of $200. And if you keep on committing offenses against these tethering laws, that could result in fines up to $1,000. And the offense may be treated as a failure to provide necessary care, potentially leading to the forfeiture of the animal. Now, that sounds like a lot to handle. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. At least I think so. Just think of yourself as being tethered outside. How long would you want to be out there and what's going on out there right now? You don't need me to tell you that the cost of energy for daily needs has increased frequently, and by a lot. Alternative energy production, it's been tried only to fail, with typically you, the consumer, are often picking up the cost of the energy company's failures. The mantra from Washington has been drill, baby, drill, which, we have been to the point where we are an oil-independent nation. That's good, primarily at the gas pump, but for electricity, well, not so much. This past week, upon taking office, New Jersey Governor Mikie Sherrill signed 2 executive orders intended to address the increasing cost of electricity in both the immediate and long-term ways. Joining us to examine these plans, their potential impact, and whether they're easier said than done is the Executive Director of New Jersey Citizen Action, Dina Mottola Jaborska. How are you today, Dina?
I'm great. How are you?
Good to talk with you about this issue. And any ray of hope for relief with the cost of energy is always good news. But like I said, and we'll find out if this is going to be easier said than done. Find out about New Jersey Citizen Action. The website is njcitizenaction.org. And let us start with the obvious, with the executive orders. As I said, 2 of them. First orders the State Board of Public Utilities to provide residential universal bill credits to offset increases in the cost of electricity. It's scheduled to take effect later on this year, relying on really the same or at least similar funding sources the boards used in an order back in August of last year that provided the credits to customers. Is this how much, when we talk credits, if I recall correctly, it was in the ballpark of $100, which, I mean, it's nice, but it certainly isn't a total solution.
Yeah, that's something that that's going to happen this summer. Is the rates would have gone up, and the state and the Board of Public Utilities instead will give us credits on our utility bills so we don't pay those increases. That's a nice short-term solution to the problem of high utility bills. But Governor Sherrill has laid out a whole roadmap forward of ways to also address the problem in the longer term.
Which brings us to the second executive order that was signed, which indeed calls for a longer-term look at alternative energy, clean energy, return to things from the past, nuclear energy, and expansion of that. Again, if someone is hearing this news about the executive orders and certainly steps in the right direction, we have to put our hope more so in long-term than we do any kind of immediate answer, do we not?
Yeah, well, we have to. We need new energy generation. There's no question about it. The second executive order both directs the state BPU to offer incentives and some relief from, power plant developers and solar energy developers from any kind of burdensome regulation so that we can quickly bring new solar online, along with battery storage, which makes solar energy able to meet our need throughout the day, over the 24-hour period, whether the sun's out or not. It also helps to expand natural gas plants that are already online but want to be producing more energy for our grid. And it also, I think, importantly, includes a program to help low-income people take advantage of energy efficiency measures that they can install in their homes so that they can reduce their bills, which will help that consumer, but everybody as well, because then if we have many consumers saving energy, that helps make our whole energy grid more secure and our state able to, our energy sources able to meet our state's needs.
And to be certain, all these ideas do answer the need for a greater electricity production in-house, because New Jersey is one of the states that relies the most on going to the market for electricity, which I know sounds weird for the layperson, but think of it as an eBay without the buy now option. At any auction, you're going to pay a higher price.
Yeah, and so the reason we pay high prices in New Jersey now, or why we have been, is because we are having these days in the summer, especially when we're using an excessive amount of energy. Everybody's got their, air conditioners on, and we're using a lot of power. And the energy, the more energy we use collectively, the more expensive it becomes. That's how the market works. So what we want to try and do with all of these measures that Governor Sherrill is incentivizing and directing is to shave off that, what they call peak demand, those moments when we're all using a lot of energy collectively, so that the price of energy can come down for all of us all the time. And so that's good, important steps in the right direction.
We get, as just a reference here, a little more precise, we get about a fifth of our electricity from out of state. Again, those auctions like I referred to. And you look at New Jersey costs for electricity, residential, never mind industrial. We have the 12th highest residential electricity cost in the nation. That's according to the latest stats. Most recent, the price of electricity has gone up by 5.5%, and that's only an average. We're talking with Dina Mottola Jaborska, who is the executive director of New Jersey Citizen Action. NJCitizenAction.org is the website, and you are listening to Issues and Ideas. There is a overseeing body for energy creation of all kinds in New Jersey. It's a co-op, really, between Pennsylvania, 13 states, but put PJM as the name, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, interconnection. With these governing bodies, do we need them on board with this, along with the BPU, for all this to work? Because I saw one comment from an organization that's, as they say, right-leaning, saying, well, if you try to control prices, then how are we going to know what the supply is? Because we won't see the prices go up. I mean, with that, just ridiculous reactions like that. But with the PJM and the BPU, how much do we need them on board with this?
We do need the PJM to be on board with this, but not everything that we just talked about. sits, the approvals don't all sit with the PJM. They mostly sit in New Jersey, but we do need the PJM, most importantly, to what's called hook up any new generation quickly to the grid, since they really operate the grid. That's the piece that they really need to do better. And absolutely, Mikie Sherrill definitely talked about that in her EOs, and also gave some additional authority to the Board of Public Utilities and some tasks to the Board of Public Utilities to review what the PJM is doing and hold them more accountable. So what we can do in New Jersey for the things that the PJM is responsible for is to just push them a little bit faster, harder to, hook up new energy generation, things like that they're really responsible for, that we really need them. There's a lot we can do in New Jersey, but that one piece, we need the PJM to really step it up.
Is it up to the PJM, too, to approve projects for everything from offshore wind, which a lot of people are saying, let's not go that way again, because the last two examples of that really didn't pan out. But if we wanted to restart a nuclear plant, for example, which is a more traditional and a proven way to create and produce a large amount of electricity, is the PJM the governing body who has to oversee every step of that development?
No, it's more complicated than that, though they do play a role in it, the PJM, but the state has some authority, as does the federal government, which is one of the reasons why it is so difficult to bring any kind of new power plant online. The permitting process is complicated and does sit at different levels of government. So, I think that she, as governor of New Jersey, is trying to do what we can do here in the state. And I'm sure as governor, she can use her leadership, her bully pulpit, to, press on government at other levels to also move along in the process of bringing us the new energy that we need.
And those multiple spots of oversight and approval also explains why there's such a backlog of projects for energy production and project creation, not just in New Jersey, but in other places around the country, and their specific overseeing organizations. And I can imagine too, if you're a corporation or a for-profit business, and you're sitting there waiting, at some point you're going to say, "This is no longer worth it anymore. I'm out."
It could be, but we're not the only grid or region that has been having this problem of energy costs. So I don't know that we're alone. I think there's other regions a business could locate in that's going to be the same issue. It's a little bit worse here, but there's also obviously all the benefits of being in New Jersey and a major metropolitan region. But definitely something that needs to be tackled. Obviously, why Governor Sherrill made it one of her top issues in her race for governor. So let's be hopeful that these many solutions that she's put forward. It's 2 executive orders. There's lots in them. A lot we talked about, some we didn't talk about yet. There's, I think some reason to be hopeful that we can start to tackle the problem.
And certainly, too, we have to think long range. We're talking, as we should, as a priority, the residential cost for electricity. But we're in the 21st century, and data centers, that is a huge opportunity for any state to be a home base for whatever capacity of data centers, the need for just activity within the state, as well as being a financial attraction from outside companies to be a headquarter for data centers. And if we're having trouble just meeting our own needs, that leaves New Jersey out of that side of the 21st century economy, too.
Yeah, and I don't think the executive orders overtly set any policy around how we're going to meet the needs of the data centers, they're very large energy users. They have what we call them large load entities. And so what was in the executive order is the governor charged the Board of Public Utilities and BPU and the EDA to review the utility business model in the state to determine how costs get allocated to ratepayers, since we have had rising costs for over 10 years. It's not just the data centers or a recent problem, but a historic problem. The governor did put this forward, and in the process of reviewing the utility business model, I think the issue of what do we do about these large load entities like data centers? Should they pay for some of their own energy and not pass the impact of their large load onto all the ratepayers in New Jersey, the residential customers who, as you mentioned. That's an issue that we can definitely be addressed in this utility review model utility model review study that she has ordered through the executive order. We're hopeful that some solutions can be brought forward about the data centers. It was subject of a piece of legislation that was that actually passed the legislature a couple weeks ago, but Governor Murphy he vetoed it on his way out. Pocket vetoed it. He did not sign it. It would have actually protected residential ratepayers from the impact of the large load data centers. And so, I'm not really sure why he vetoed it, but it's definitely an issue that I think a lot of people understand is important to tackle. It is one of the reasons why our rates are so high.
And we'll just end by pointing this out, too, from the executive orders. This isn't one of those long-range, multi-year studies. The BPU is on a short clock with 45 days to initiate a solicitation for, as it says, for qualifying solar facilities or solar facilities in combination with storage, 45-day period for other parts of the program. And with 180 days, the BPU has to begin development of a virtual power plant program with the purpose to drive down peak demand by aggregating behind-the-meter distributed energy resources, reading from the executive order. So it's a turn in the right direction, and it has the proper attention to the need for a sense of urgency. So we'll see how the follow-through comes through. That's always going to be the question. So to learn more about this issue, as well as the other points of focus for New Jersey Citizen Action, their website, njcitizenaction.org. She is our executive director, Dina Mottola Jaborska. Dina, thanks for the explanation of what is coming down the lane as far as electricity costs in New Jersey. There's hope on the horizon. Let's hope it gets a lot closer, a lot faster. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Rare earth minerals. They've become quite a priority for the U.S. as of late, have they not? Well, maybe you've been aware of as of late, but it goes a little bit deeper than that, as we're about to explore. These are natural resources, which are crucial for the areas of, let's see, technology, military, energy, transportation, and you get the idea. Pretty important stuff, and valuable, too. While it at least appears that the U.S. is ramping up on moving on rare earth minerals, as my next guest writes, China has long held a commanding lead regarding these crucial materials. So how is China putting that dominance to use? And can the U.S. catch up and close the gap? He writes about all this in his new book, Mineral War, China's Quest for Weapons of Mineral Destruction. He's a portfolio manager of a critical minerals investment fund at Amvest Capital, geopolitical analyst, and host of the podcast Tyranny Today. Tomasz Nadrowski, thanks for being here today, Thomas.
Thanks for having me.
Two websites, themineralwar.com, and learn more about Amvest Capital, amvestcapital.com, and we do have those links over at our homepage. Real fast, primary for the novice in all this, what are rare earth minerals and why are these so important in the 21st century?
So rare earth minerals are 17 different elements in the table of elements that you'll remember from school, probably, or hopefully.
Yes.
They were hidden at the bottom, not very visible, and they tend to co-occur in nature, which is one reason why they're a little complex, more complex to extract and process than other minerals. In fact, we should call them rare earth elements rather than minerals, because minerals are different conglomerates that you find in subsoil from which you mine them, and then you have to refine them and separate them, and this is what's different with rare earths. You have to separate them into different oxides, some of which are very valuable, and others are less valuable, but you still have to separate them, and that increases the cost of operating a rare earth facility. So this is the first problem of this. The second problem is that they're often associated with radionuclides. So radioactive materials such as thorium and uranium. In many countries, jurisdictions do not allow for simply unregulated processing or transportation or handling of these materials. That's also the case of the United States, where Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and back in the 1980s, tightened the regulations, which means that essentially a thorium of 0.05% was considered Class 7 material, and that increased the cost of production and mining of rare earths. And essentially, we can date maybe early 1990s, late 1980s, the beginning of the death of the American rare earth industry. And slowly, but very confidently, China has taken over in the 1990s throughout the entire value chain, including mining. That's because of very attractive geology that southern China has, in the so-called Yangtze Craton. That might surprise some of listeners, but southern China, actually geologically, is part of the southern hemisphere of Gondwana supercontinent. So when you hear about mining in South America, Africa, or Australia, sort of par excellence regions of the world where there's a lot of mining and a lot of metal mining, well, southern China belongs to the same category, geologically speaking. So there was an endowment from day one, naturally, mineralization, but mineralization has to be transformed into resources to reserves, and that has to be mined and processed. That processing technology was imported by China from the West and subsequently monopolized because most of the Western jurisdictions were not comfortable with very environmentally damaging mining that rare earth involves. So that's a story, and it's a story that's been going on for 30 years. Now, of course, we're waking up, as you mentioned, to the vital role that these materials play in permanent magnets and sensors and optoelectronics and so on. And it turns out China monopolizes them and does not shy away from weaponizing access to these materials, which is precisely the problem we're facing right now.
Along with their obviously close proximity to a massive raw material supply, their ability to refine it, thanks to the West, another stab in the heart for that one. How much does the China system of government and lack of freedom and forced labor, I mean, the list can go on from there. How valuable was that in how China gained the command and the leadership in the rare earth mineral environment?
Yeah, so this is a good question. I'm going into some detail about this in the book. There are several reasons for Chinese leadership today, or dominance, if you wish. We believed, the capital markets in the U.S., for a long time that inevitably somehow China will follow the pathway of liberal economies following their access to World Trade Organization in 2001. This might or might not have been the plan in Beijing, but certainly since 2006, back then the premier was Wen Jiabao in Beijing, China decided to go back into something that they were very good at, industrial policies. So top-down planning of which industry should be successful, which industry is promising growth, given the technological changes and so on. There were several iterations of this, and the real break from our model, our capital market founded model, occurred after the great financial crisis. Essentially, China decided to control big parts of the industry. It was easier to do upstream. Of course, mining and refining are different nodes in the larger value chains, which are upstream, where the Communist Party and state-owned enterprises were dominant anyway. There was some private business, especially in rare earths in the South, smaller operators. And in 2010, there was the first episode of a conflict over rare earth elements between China and Japan. And China tried to weaponize that this trade and was successful for about 2 months. But Chinese smugglers managed to export and ship some material to Japan because the prices, of course, skyrocketed around the world when the material was not available. And Japan is the largest client, largest customer for both Chinese permanent rare earth magnets as well as rare earth oxides. And so since that experience, so 2010, China decided to tighten the system and as much as possible nationalize the entire rare earth industry and make sure that there is no leakage in future. And there were certain steps, but it accelerated right after the COVID pandemic in 2020 when China promulgated a new law called Export Control Law, and this was October 2020. I actually started the fund, Amvest and Critical Minerals Fund, when that legislation was passed, because of course that raised the issue of potential restrictions on shipments of this material to other trade partners, as it was the case 10 years before during that spat with Japan. And that's precisely what has happened. So the last 2 or 3 years, we had a whole series of regulations, in China, constraining or controlling more severely different flows of different materials, not just rare earths, but also tungsten, antimony, graphite, gallium, germanium, and others that you occasionally may hear in the headlines. Very important as dual-use materials. So some of the uses are for the military, some for the civilian market. And this came to a head eventually in 2025, last year, when China decided to use that dominance as a pushback against the U.S. approach to rebalance our trade with China and sort of rebalance the very lopsided relationship between, our current account deficit and the huge current account surplus that China maintains, not only vis-a-vis U.S. but also many other partners. So that's sort of a longer story, but it's been in gestation for a while.
And we have time with Tomasz Nadrowski, who's the author of The Mineral War, China's Quest for Weapons of Mineral Destruction, themineralwar.com, the website you're listening to, Issues and Ideas. Just to wrap up, earlier segment, we were talking about energy shortages with electricity, and I mentioned the mantra, drill, baby, drill. Is the U.S. too entrapped by our own doing on 20th century thinking of oil versus the 21st century thinking of rare earth minerals? Because I know we have a deal with Ukraine. How's the mining industry in Ukraine these days? We have a deal with, hopefully, to get rare earth out of Venezuela if the miners don't get their throats cut. Greenland, deal there, but even China couldn't get anything of significance out of Greenland. What's one of the major first steps that the U.S. has to do to start thinking 21st century needs in raw materials and energy?
Excellent question. At least two questions I see here. First, regarding our bilateral deals with different countries. I think that's positive. Unfortunately, America first in geology doesn't work very well because you cannot onshore that very well. So yes, we are dependent on our partners, and that, there's a whole slew of agreements that this administration signed with Japan and Korea, which are important refiners, with Australia and other mining countries, also with DRC and Ukraine. Some of these are long dated. Greenland definitely, has very attractive mineralization, but mining is not for tomorrow. There's a reason why there are only 2 mines in Greenland, and none of them produces critical minerals. But the second question you ask about oil, and that's a very interesting one. I also allude to this in my book. Oil investment is very different, and we have a capital market that's very well attuned to the needs of the oil business. It's high depletion, heavy capex, but short duration investment. So you get to cash relatively quickly. And this is what the private market actually really liked, and a lot of leverage is possible to do. And oil wells can respond to the needs of shareholders really quickly, whether to pay out dividends or reinvest the money into another well. In minerals, it doesn't work like this. Let's leave aside rare earths with all the regulatory problems. To build a large copper mine takes about 15 years. 15 years. And to explore for copper, zinc, or rare earth for that matter, or lithium, or anything else, you have to spend many years without cash. So you need an equity market with low cost of capital. And for this, we probably need to overhaul our tax system to attract U.S. capital to companies that exist in other jurisdictions where there is a much more successful mining industry, such as Australia, Canada, UK. And these are the countries which have with us an agreement embedded in our legislation called Defense Production Act, Title III, because materials from those countries are considered domestic source for our military, for our national security. So I think there's a lot of homework to be done, and I hope that we are on the right path, but this is a long journey ahead.
For you listening, we've talked a lot in recent months about rare earth minerals, but what Tomasz does with Mineral Wars, he brings a more wide scope and understanding through the history, through the transitions, through the stumbles and even outright failures of response to what China has been so strongly progressing and growing in, that you'll gain an understanding, a much more better understanding through the education that he offers with Mineral Wars. Again, you can find out more at themineralwar.com and learn more about Amvest Capital, amvestcapital.com. Tomasz Nadrowski, you bring the understanding of the importance of something that needs to be understood as being important, and congratulations on doing that with your book. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
This past week, Donald Trump spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos. It was interesting. That's a good word. Spoke for little more than an hour. And some of the points that Trump hit on said Greenland is U.S. territory and he wants it back. Also referred to Greenland as Iceland several times. Claimed the grocery prices are going down. The bad economy in the U.S., that's the Biden economy. Trump claimed he ended 8 wars, won the 2020 election. He attacked U.S. allies while praising Russia and North Korea. Trump said Canada lives because of the United States. Said that NATO owes him Greenland. And called numerous times rare earth minerals rare earth. If you doubt my pointing all these out, the video exists. You can check me on that. Trump also touted, he said, an agreement regarding Greenland where he got everything that he wanted. No, we don't own Greenland. I know that was the claim, that was the desire. He wanted it. He wanted a piece of ice. Now MAGA is saying, no. Ownership of Greenland, that was never part of the situation of the conversation. When you look at what the agreement did at least establish, well, it actually reestablished a lot of what was part of the 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement. And there's talks for further down the line regarding mineral rights and Arctic security, but when you look at the Greenland Agreement, it's basically, imagine walking into your boss's office saying, I'm going to get a raise. You're telling everyone going in, when I go in there and I come out, I'm going to have a raise. Then you come out and say, hey, got everything I wanted. Still have my job. MAGA is also looking at all this as, yeah, badass Trump. He put everyone under his foot. All of Europe, all of NATO. Trump ruled. Well, they're sort of keen on this bullying and intimidation. That's long been Trump's act, just now on a bigger stage. Maybe think back to a time I was flying out of Burbank Airport. I was going to go from Burbank, Dallas-Fort Worth to Newark. Wanted to be home in time to have Easter with Mom. So I'm waiting to board Burbank, and the announcement comes over, the plane's broken. And by the time they get another plane to replace the broken plane, by the time we get to Dallas, we won't be able to get the connecting flight to get to Newark, so have an overnight stay curled up in a plastic chair in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, which that did not sound appealing to me. So I got online, see what arrangements could be made, called home, said to Mom, well, here's what happened, I'll make it up to you. Called my friend who I was staying with out in Southern California, said, do you mind if I hang out for Easter? She said, sure, love to have you. And I'm watching person after person just totally slice and dice the poor woman behind the counter, the poor agent, like she's the one who broke the plane. And she is not having a happy time with all this. So when I step up, put a big smile on my face, look at her and go, yeah, it's not easy, is it? But I think I'm going to change that. Let's just wipe everything off the slate. What flight can you get me on Monday to go from here to Dallas to Newark? You know what she did? Took Dallas out of the equation. Nonstop flight from Burbank to Newark, bumped me up to first class, and tripled my bonus points. See what happens when you don't intimidate and try to be a human being? Peace. It's a noble idea. To achieve peace, understanding, truth, confession, admission, compromise are among the requirements. This past week saw the official formation, led by Donald Trump, of the Gaza Board of Peace. Now, questions have quickly followed the signing of the charter in Davos this past week. Is the focus aimed properly, correctly, efficiently, or are the nations who are signed on to this idea effective participants? Why have other nations declined to sign on, at least at this point? Are there ulterior motives behind this plan? Here to look at all of this is the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, Executive Director of the Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa, author of the book, The Wars Over Words and Deeds. Asaf Romirowsky, how are you today, sir?
Doing all right. Good morning.
And for the respective websites with Mr. Romirowsky, we have these at our homepage, of course, SPME for Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, and for the Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa, ASMEAscholars.org. And again, we have those links at our homepage. So when you first heard of the plans, the intention for what's called the Gaza Board of Peace, What were your initial thoughts? And when you saw what unfolded this past week, did those initial thoughts and hopes change in any way for you, sir?
Well, I mean, I think that it has a nice aspirational goal. There are many mines and red flags that I see along the way. I mean, namely, for starters, the fact that Qatar and Turkey were invited to join, and the fact that those two in particular actors were complicit with 10-7, that's a non-starter for the Israelis. The other part, which is part of trying to dissect the board of peace, which is a little bit convoluted, the entire org chart as you look at it. The fact of the matter is that there were two demands beginning between Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 also demanded bringing back all the hostages dead and alive. We're still waiting on one more hostage to come back, which is yet to come back. And the other part, which is the demilitarizing of Hamas itself. And so, of course, Hamas has refused that. And though yesterday in Davos, Jared Kushner did make a comment to say that the demilitarization of Hamas is still on the table. The concern that the Israelis have that this entire architecture is really allowing Hamas to thrive and giving them oxygen and being part of the reconstruction of Gaza and the day after tomorrow. So these are the challenges. I think that on a positive note, it's good that Trump is actually taking initiative and trying to create this as far as the expansion of the Abraham Accords and whatnot. But Gaza is still a very complex arena and still considered to be a war zone.
You mentioned the Abraham Accords. Does this Board of Peace distract or take away or divert attention from what the Abraham Accords were intended to do?
Well, the Abraham Accords were a major feat in the sense that it created normalization between Israel and its neighbors. There is the one partner who's yet to join yet, which I think everybody is still waiting on, are the Saudis. The Saudis have a little bit of cold feet these days, with their own challenges with some of the Emiratis and other Gulf states, and they have predicated their involvement on the beginning or the reconstruction of Gaza, and trying to establish a two-state solution as far as the way they see it. Easier said than done. It's also worthy reminding your listeners that back in 2000, the Saudis also put money for trying to create a coastal, a coastal kind of area where there could be condos on the coast of Gaza and a resort area and things of the sort. That never came to fruition, obviously. So we have a lot of challenges in that regard. In this particular area, I would say that they're using Gaza, which needs a great deal of rehabilitation and a great deal of money, which is why every country is demanded to give it $1 billion to start this. That's where it's all coming from. But I don't see this happening immediately. It's much more complex. And, of course, the looming threat of Iran, which also represents a larger destabilizing force of the region at large.
With Iran in mind, too, the fact that Trump has positively invited Russia, in other words, Vladimir Putin, to be a part of the Board of Peace. When you look into the facts and the history of how much support Russia has given Iran, where in the realm of possibilities can that association end well with the Board of Peace?
Agreed. I mean, I think that's these are all major red flags, and the Russian and the Chinese have been funding the Iranians. I think it's good that he's getting international buy-in. Everybody sees Gaza as ground zero for a lot of activities in the region, but until there's going to be an alternative for Hamas, let's also not forget that this entire war that began on 10/7 is part of a multi-front war with Iran. Iran has had more American blood on its hands than any other country, and every involvement of terrorism today over the past 4 decades has involved the Iranians. And so it's good in theory. When it comes to the granular practicalities of how to configure the politics of who's on the ground and who's actually going to allow this to happen, is much more challenging. I don't see any problem allowing international forces as part of this international stabilization force coming into the Israeli side. I have a difficult time seeing Hamas, who is still controlling the other 50% of Gaza, allowing anybody but themselves to come in security-wise and try to govern the area. So they're going to balk at that.
So with Asaf Romirowsky, Executive Director of the Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, SPME.org, Executive Director of the Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa, ASMEAScholars.org, and also author of the book, The War is Over Words and Deeds. And you're listening to Issues and Ideas. How important is it to watch? I mean, it's obvious to watch what Hamas does. Still waiting to see whether Israel comes on board with more than just words, which is where they're at this point right now as far as becoming a part of the Gaza border peace after initial objection, strong objection too. How important is it to watch Jared Kushner? Because, as you said, there have been hints and plans, wishes, whims, call them whatever you will, that Gaza could be some sort of luxury oceanfront resort area, and that's certainly something that Jared Kushner has ties with as far as construction and other assets to make that happen. And what does that mean for the people of Gaza, who have been the total victims in all of this?
Again, one needs to, I think if we care about the betterment of the people of Gaza, then you need to get Hamas out of the way. You need to divorce Palestinian society from Hamas, which is a Islamist terrorist group which is abusing its own people. And so, not to mention the fact that we've seen over the past course of the war, they've been stealing the goods, they've been abusing the people. Hamas is not a partner for peace. Hamas's demand is still calling for the annihilation of the state of Israel and still killing Israelis, Americans, and Westerners. It's all part of their charter. So that hasn't changed. They may try to sell themselves as changing their attitude as far as trying to look for a kind of a group that is talking for reform and governance, and they may put on suits, but their ideology hasn't changed. And I think we cannot forget that. The fact of the matter is that part of the failures of 10/7 was not paying enough attention to the agenda of Hamas. And they've been building these terror tunnels for 20 years. This is a larger architecture of terrorism that hasn't gone away. I don't see any future where Hamas is going to coexist and coincide with Israel. So if we care about trying to about the Arab Palestinians, then Hamas cannot be that governing body. I'm also skeptical about whether or not the Palestinian Authority is an alternative. They're a little bit more secular in their narrative, but not that much in their larger ideology of annihilationism. And so I think that we have a problem here. And so this is where all these other parties are coming in, outside parties, and can you try to create something by way of an alternative? But step one still needs to be Hamas cannot be part of any of this. And I think that's where we're stuck here. If Hamas is given the impression that it's going to be part of a political entity and trying to differentiate supposedly between the political wing of Hamas versus the military wing of Hamas, let's have no illusions about that. They are one and the same.
Would the key be for a successful, effective dealing with Hamas being to look back at what was done right, what was done wrong during the days of dealing and trying to put in diplomacy and negotiations with the PLO back in the days?
Potentially, you have to have a partner for somebody. But, again, one of the main conditions for, and it was back in the Oslo days, back in the 90s, was recognition of the other rights to exist. So far there is no mutual recognition. And I think that, yes, there's been a great deal of suffering. There's been a great deal of collateral damage. There's a lot of destruction that needs to be looked at. But are you putting your eggs in the Hamas basket, which still is committed to killing Israelis, Jews, and Americans worldwide, as part of this configuration? I have a difficult time with that. Again, I think that what got Hamas to the table, and, going back to how the ceasefire came about, was the fact that its patrons, namely the Qataris and the Turks, who had their own national interests from the administration. They wanted, the F-35s, the Turks, and of course the Qataris want, as far as expansion of the air base. And so all those are things that they want, and they basically convinced Hamas that this is the best deal you're going to get 2+ years after the war itself. And so they have their own goals in mind. That being said, I think that's also how they are part of the conversation now and still part of they were also invited to join the board. Do you trust these people and these actors who are actively state sponsors of terrorism? And I think that's, to my mind, I'm quite skeptical about that. Whether or not there'll be other pressure coming in from other Arab partners, again, Saudis, Egyptians, Jordanians, money coming in that will allow the financial incentives to kind of reconfigure and control the area with some of this, potentially, but it doesn't solve the ideological problems in their narrative of destruction and annihilationism.
And for you listening, just to wrap up here, if you want to get a better idea of the stumbling block, the high hurdle Hamas provides, we have a copy of their charter at our downloads page for you to review. But as I've said, it's just recognizing that Israel can exist. Even at this point, Hamas has yet to do that. He is the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, SPME.org. Also Executive Director of the Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa, ASMEAscholars.org, and author of the book, The Wars Over Words and Deeds. Asaf Romirowsky, thanks so much for your insight, for being here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
The age-old saying is, silence is golden, is it? Our Lord God says this to Paul in Acts chapter 18, verses 9 and 10. Now the Lord spoke to Paul in the night by a vision. Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not keep silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to hurt you. When you think about it, silence is certainly not something we want from God, is it? This is what the psalmist writes in Psalm chapter 83, verse 1. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. Depending on what version of the Bible you have, the word speak is found in God's word well over 500 times, while silent shows up just over 50 times. There's a phrase which has become familiar to us since the terrorist attacks September 11, 2001. You know it. If you see something, right, say something. If an ad agency or PR person got paid for showing up with that slogan, well, they got away with stealing the money, because it's certainly not an original idea. All throughout the Bible, we're taught, commanded even, to speak up in order to reveal and put down what is wrong and what is ungodly. We're not told to speak for the sake of speaking. We all have that person in our lives who, they talk a lot and really have nothing to say. It's the verbal version of those book reports. Be honest now, we all did them at least once back in our school days when we didn't read the book. We turned in a paper just totally overloaded with adjectives and adverbs. Jesus in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 warns against doing this. But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. We are to speak up and speak out as Father God teaches us. All of us, even Jesus, who in John chapter 12, verse 50 tells us this, and I know that his command is everlasting life, therefore whatever I speak, just as the Father has told me, so I speak. The Bible teaches us to speak with his truth. We're not to speak just to please others, nor to gain approval of any kind. Jesus declares this in Luke chapter 6, verse 26. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. As Christians, we are ordained and empowered to be God's messengers, and when we do this in obedience to his will, it will not always be an easy time for us. Be honest here. This is explained in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 4 through 7. But in all things we commend ourselves as ministers of God in much patience, in tribulations and needs, in distresses, in stripes and imprisonments, in tumults and labors, in sleeplessness and fastings, by purity, by knowledge, by longsuffering, by kindness, by the Holy Spirit, by sincere love, by the word of truth, by the power of God, by the armor of righteousness, on the right hand and on the left. When we speak up and speak out, it's not to confront in any way, shape, or form. That's what the evildoers rely on. We speak to bring God's light into the world so the darkness of Satan can be extinguished. And this difference between the light and the darkness was really one of the first acts of God with his creation. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 4. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, which demonstrates that the light and the darkness are not equal. They do not and cannot coexist. The darkness comes from someone who sees themselves as God, while the light comes from the one and only true God. This is why nothing done in the darkness can or should remain a secret. Jesus says this in Mark chapter 4, verse 22, "For there is nothing hidden which will not be revealed, nor has anything been kept secret, but that it should come to light." The work we're assigned as messengers of God's Word is to be done in peace and with love, since our Lord is of peace and love. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 24 through 26 gives us these instructions. "And a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient, in humility, correcting those who are in opposition, if God perhaps will grant them repentance, so that they may know the truth, and that they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil, having been taken captive by him to do his will." Satan, as we can clearly see, is hard at work in our world today. Rights being denied, lies being repeated and believed, hate and bullying used for the purpose of intimidation, very heritage and dignity of America being used as a doormat for the dirty shoes of the darkness. Those who Satan has enlisted to perpetrate his desires, they thrive in the darkness. It's foolish to go onto their home field, try to end their efforts. The darkness is their one and only weapon. We, however, are the body of the church, with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ as the head of the church. When we speak out as the body in order to reveal and put down evil, we do so with the ultimate force that no darkness can or will ever overcome. While what we read in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, spoken by Jesus, is not a secret, it cannot be stopped. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. Be sure to check out our website, issuesandideasradio.com. Just on the homepage alone, along with more information about the guests who are with us here on the show today, access to all our social media podcast outlets. You have features and downloads. You go deeper into the page with the links page, the audio archive. You'll find it all at issuesandideasradio.com. Always thankful and grateful for your attention and your time. It's very valuable and special to us. Look forward to being with you right here this time next week for our next edition of Issues and Ideas.